She thought she was someone because she worked for a rich family. Man, life can be so unfair. I'm Avril, by the way, and I clean toilets for a living. But what can you do when your family is dirt poor and can't afford to let you finish high school? This was the only job I could get without doing something that would get me in trouble or affect my family. And yet, Marissa landed on this big job, and now she won't even acknowledge my existence. We used to be best friends. She comes from a poor family too, but it's not like she'll acknowledge that. She doesn't even speak to her family anymore because she's too ashamed of them. The first time she came to the cafe I work in, I tried to hide, but she saw me and gave me the biggest smirk I've ever seen. I wanted to curl up and die. She even flicked her hair as she walked out. And then she started coming every day. At around 9:30, she'd march in with the 2 kids she looked after and order a whole bunch of stuff. And then, in a loud, fake voice, she'd say stuff like, "Oh, you little darlings, are you excited for Paris this weekend? I certainly am." So I did the next best thing. I spat in her coffee. And then I came up with a plan. I started watching her closely every time she came in and got to learn her little routine. Every morning after her coffee, she'd go to the bathroom. It was always exactly at 10 a.m. And then I remembered she's diabetic and had to take her insulin. One morning at 9:50, after she'd ordered her coffee, I ran to the bathroom and started waxing and polishing the floor. I made sure it was super slippery, and then I quickly came out to watch. To my absolute horror, the little boy stood up and said he needed the toilet and asked Marissa to take him. No, this wasn't supposed to happen. They started walking towards the bathroom, and I went into full-blown panic mode. And then, thankfully, Marissa's phone started ringing, and she ran to get it, and the little boy shouted that he'd go into the boys' bathroom instead on his own. I was so relieved. I actually let out a proper sigh. I watched as the clock ticked towards 10, and then, like clockwork, Marissa got her insulin out her bag and went to the bathroom. Jackpot. Straight away, there was a huge crashing sound, and I almost jumped for joy. Hopefully, she'd have broken her legs, and then she couldn't work, right? I never wanted to see her smug face in this cafe again. But she didn't break her legs. It was much worse than that. I ran in there, and she was lying flat on her back, completely unconscious. Oh, God. What if I'd killed her? The kids started screaming and asked me to call their mom, and then the boy gave me his phone. My gosh, the kids even had their own phones? I called her and asked her to come quick, and then I called an ambulance. There was no one else in the cafe. Even my manager was out running errands, so I quickly ran to Marissa's bag and dropped something inside. When the mom arrived, I couldn't believe it. She looked like a supermodel. She thanked me for calling her and asked if she could call Marissa's mom to let her know what had happened. Before I could even reply, she started digging through Marissa's bag, and that's when she found it. A bag of peanuts. The kids were allergic to peanuts, like majorly allergic, so I'd stuck a bag in there as part of my plan. The mom was horrified and asked the kids if they were okay. Then I asked what was wrong, and said that Marissa always had peanuts and drank almond milk in her cappuccino every day. The mom gasped and grabbed her kids into a big hug. The ambulance finally arrived, and the paramedics were shocked. They said they didn't know when she'd regain consciousness, and so I turned to the kid's mom and said, "Hey, I can look after the kids in the meantime if you want, just until Marissa is back on her feet." Then you won't believe it. The mom looked at me and said, "That girl is going nowhere near my kids ever again. She could have killed them with these peanuts." "Okay, when can you start?" Then she asked me if I had any experience with kids, and I showed her my portfolio. I'd printed a whole bunch of photos that I'd photoshopped of me and this fake family that I'd made up. She seemed impressed, but then she suddenly looked confused. "But why are you working in this cafe if you have all this experience?" she asked. I told her my family owned the cafe, and then she relaxed a bit. Thank God she offered me the job, because when my manager came back, he fired me on the spot and said he could be sued because of me. But I told him I was about to quit anyway and said, "See you later, loser," as I skipped out of there. I was about to start a new life, and I couldn't wait. I started the very next day, and the minute I approached their house, I thought I was dreaming. It was huge. The kids actually seemed excited to see me, and that first day went well. I had to totally fake it until I made it, but it seemed to work. We hung out by their pool all day, and I taught them some basic swimming skills, and their mom was so impressed when she found out. Then one day, the mom asked me if I could join them on a weekend trip to Paris. Luckily, I'd applied for my passport as soon as I started working for them, because I'd been waiting for this magical moment. So I decided to create a fake social media account. I had to document this. I was going to Paris, for goodness sake. After that, I made sure to wear lots of perfume. By the end of the trip, I had like 1,000 followers on social media. I always filtered out the kids as I didn't want the family finding out I was pretending to be a rich girl. And then I felt like I'd won the lottery. When we got back from the trip, the mom asked me if I'd like to move in with them. I honestly almost hugged her. I asked if her husband would be okay with that, and she said, "Oh, he's always working, so he won't even notice." True, I thought. I'd never even met him. Anyway, when I moved in, I brought 3 suitcases. 2 were filled with old newspapers and stuff I'd found on the street. I didn't want them thinking I only had 1 suitcase of stuff. And my room was amazing. I had a view of the whole city and my own balcony. That first night, I lay there pinching myself. How was this all real? The next day, I noticed my followers had almost tripled, and I had a message from a guy asking me if I was single. My heart started thumping, and I did something crazy. I told him I was going to have a house party that night, and did he want to come and bring some friends? The mom and kids were going to visit their grandma, and she'd asked me to house sit. Of course, I said yes, and as soon as they left, I messaged everyone I knew, including all my followers, and invited them to my party. I started snooping around in the dad's study and realized he was involved in some kind of illegal business. Interesting, I thought. And oh my God, the party was epic. There must have been at least 100 people there, and I even wore some of the mom's clothes so that I could look all fancy. The guy who asked if I was single came, and he was so hot. At around midnight, I asked everyone to leave in case the cops came, and everyone actually listened to me. No one had ever listened to me before like this. I asked the guy to stay behind, and we started making out on the sofa. I felt like a total queen. Suddenly, though, we heard voices. I thought maybe someone had forgotten something, but then I realized it was a familiar voice. It was Marissa. What was she doing here? I quickly put my clothes back on, and me and the guy dived behind the sofa. Marissa wasn't alone. She was with a man. "See, I told you something was going on. That girl your wife hired is a fraud. And look what she's done to your house. You better call the police." Aw, geez, she was with the dad. But why was she with the dad? And then I heard something disgusting. They were kissing. But I was not surprised. I have seen them do worse things before, and I filmed them, but never showed the video to anyone. "Stop. We can't do this anymore. What if my wife finds out?" the dad said. And then you won't believe it. The mom and kids arrived. I was officially trapped. I was right by the door, and the kids saw me straight away. The mom started screaming at her husband and Marissa. They'd been caught red-handed. But so had I. I stood up, and the guy I was with ran out the door. Then Marissa started shouting at me, saying I'd given her brain damage, and then the mom was screaming at Marissa, and the little boy said, "Oh, I saw Daddy kissing Marissa lots of times before, Mommy." I thought I'd be in deep trouble about the party, and that they'd call the police. Marissa was shouting that I was a fraud, and even played a video of me that she'd got from the cafe, showing how I'd deliberately planted the peanuts and caused her accident. But the mom didn't care. She was more horrified about what her child had said. But then, her husband managed to convince her that nothing was going on between him and Marissa, and he started blaming me for this mess. But just when he was about to fire me and call the police to come and arrest me, I told him that I need to talk to him on the side for a moment. When we went into a separate room, I tried to seduce him, but he wouldn't go for it, and he started yelling at me. But then, I pulled out my phone and I showed him the tape I had of him and Marissa. He was sweating as he looked at my screen. "How do you have this video?" he asked. I was in control now. I told him that if he tries to make any more moves on me, like calling the police, I would leave his wife no place to doubt that he was cheating on her. He started begging me not to do it, but then I told him, "For $1 million, I won't." He quickly said no, but then I was like, "You know what? Let's make it 10 million. He asked me if I was crazy, so I acted like I was about to send it. He realized that he can't refuse, and I left the house without getting punished for what I did, and knowing that $10 million will be waiting in my bank account tomorrow. I guess my message from this story would be that you shouldn't trust anyone. Just because they look or sound innocent doesn't mean they don't have a dark side.